Hello everyone, Dark of All Trades here. Now for today, I'm going to try something a little different. I'm going to take my years of teaching experience and apply the neutrality I'm typically forced to be in this video. I want this video to reach everyone, whether they're a theist or an atheist. I want to keep this explanation as casual as I can while I'm still getting my point across. So for this video, consider me a secular teacher at a public school explaining this lesson to a class of students with diverse religious backgrounds and beliefs. As you may have guessed from the title, this one's going to be about my main area of expertise, the topic that got me interested in teaching in the first place, and that is language. So this is probably going to be a little weird, but that's okay. I am here to have fun and educate. But that's enough for an intro. I will say that, as is likely my favorite line from the late great musician,
I hope you will enjoy it. And if you don't, there's absolutely nothing I can do about it.
Now, have you ever tried to explain a dream to someone? You know, that bizarre one where you're flying on a unicorn through a landscape made out of spaghetti while your high school math teacher cheers you on in fluent Klingon? Yeah, that one. Now imagine trying to describe something even more abstract and personal, like a concept of God or the feeling of spiritual enlightenment. Welcome to the wild and wacky world of religious language. So for today, I'm going to dive into the philosophy of religious language. Now don't worry, we won't be conjugating verbs in biblical Hebrew or decoding any mystical texts. Instead, I'm going to be exploring how humans attempt to talk about the divine, the spiritual, and the ineffable, and whether we're making any sense when we do. Now you might be thinking, why should I care how we talk about God? Isn't that just a bunch of semantic navel-gazing? Well, hold on to your prayer beads, because this stuff matters more than you might think. How we talk about religious concepts shapes how we understand them, how we communicate our beliefs to others, and even how those beliefs evolve over time. So think about it. Every major religious text, every theological debate, every coexist bumper sticker is, at its core, an attempt to put religious ideas into words. But can words really capture the essence of the divine? Can language bridge the gap between the material and the spiritual? Or are we all just shouting into the cosmic void, hoping someone or something out there understands us? These are the questions that I'm going to be grappling with today. So buckle up your mental seatbelts, open your minds, and get ready to dive into the fascinating, frustrating, and sometimes downright funny world of religious language. I promise by the end of this video, you'll never look at the phrase, "God works in mysterious ways," the same way again. And you might just have some new material for your next philosophical debate over at the coffee shop or at the bar or here on the YouTubes. So let's get started. And as Christians like to say, in the beginning was the Word. But it really has been all downhill in the communication department since then. Alright, so let's get into the meat and potatoes of religious language. Or should I say the bread and wine, or the milk and honey. You see, I'm already knee-deep in religious metaphors and I've just begun. So what exactly is religious language? Well, it's not like a secret code used by monks to order pizza without breaking their vows of silence. Although, come to think of it, that would be pretty cool. No, religious language is a set of words, phrases, and concepts we use to talk about religious or spiritual ideas. It's how we attempt to describe the indescribable, to put into words experiences and beliefs that often seem to transcend language itself. Now, religious language comes in a few different flavors. First, we have literal language. That is when people use words to mean exactly what they say. God is good, boom, straightforward. But here's where it gets tricky. How do we define good when we're talking about a divine being? Is it the same good we use when talking about a particularly satisfying burrito? Then we have analogical language. This is when we describe something by comparing it to something else. God is like a father. We're using our understanding of human fatherhood to grasp something about the nature of this God. But let's be real. If your dad is anything like mine, this analogy might raise some more questions than it answers. Lastly, we have metaphorical language. This is when we use symbolic language to express abstract ideas. God is a rock. Well, unless we're talking about Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, we probably don't mean this literally. We're using qualities we associate with rocks, stability, strength, reliability, to say something about the divine. And here's where we run into the God talk dilemma. How do you talk about something that's supposed to be beyond human comprehension? It's like trying to explain the internet to a medieval peasant, only harder. We're limited by our human experiences and language, yet we're attempting to describe something that's supposed to transcend both. It's like trying to play cosmic charades. We're all frantically gesturing, trying to convey this grand, ineffable concept, while the rest of the universe watches in bemused silence, probably thinking, nope, still don't get it. Is it a movie, a book, the meaning of life? So the next time you hear someone confidently proclaiming what God is or isn't, remember, we're all just doing our best with the limited tools we have. Religious language is our attempt to bridge the gap between the human and the divine, to make sense of the senseless, to speak the unspeakable. It's a noble effort, even if we sometimes end up sounding like we're explaining quantum physics to a goldfish. All right, strap in, folks. We're about to take a whirlwind tour through some of the biggest ideas in the philosophy of religious language. Now, don't worry, I promise it'll be more fun than a roller coaster ride through the dictionary. Well, almost. Let's start with logical positivism, the philosophical equivalent to that one friend who always ruins the movie by pointing out plot holes. These folks came along in the early 20th century and basically said, if you can't prove it scientifically, it's meaningless. According to them, saying God exists has about as much meaning as saying colorless green ideas sleep furiously. It sounds like language, but it doesn't actually mean anything. But don't worry, religious language fans, all hope is not lost. Enter Ludwig Wittgenstein. Wittgenstein introduced the idea of language games. No, it's not a new app for your phone. It's the idea that language gets its meaning from how it's used in different contexts or forms of life. So religious language is its own game with its own rules. It's like saying baseball and cricket are both valid games, even if they have different rules. Next up, we have the approach of analogy and metaphor. This is the God is like a father, or the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed approach. It's saying, look, we can't directly describe God, but we can point to things in our experience that give us a hint. It's like trying to explain the taste of an orange to someone who has never had fruit. You might say, it's sweet like sugar, but also tangy like, well, you just have to try it. Last but not least, we have apophatic theology, also known as the God is not approach. These folks say we can't say what God is, only what God isn't. God isn't finite, isn't changeable, isn't material. It's like playing the world's most cosmic game of 20 questions, where the answer is always no, and you never actually get to guess what it is. Each of these approaches has its strengths and weaknesses. Logical positivism reminds us to be careful about what we claim to know, but it might throw our baby out with the bathwater. Wittgenstein's approach allows for the validity of religious language, but might lead to relativism. Analogy and metaphor give us ways to grasp divine concepts, but they can also be misleading if taken too far. And apophatic theology maintains divine mystery, but it might not give us much to go on in terms of understanding. So what's a poor mortal to do when trying to talk about the divine? Well, that's the fun part. We get to wrestle with these ideas, try them on for size, and see what works for us. It's like a philosophical buffet. Try a little of everything, but be prepared for some intellectual indigestion. Remember, the goal isn't necessarily to find the right way to talk about religious concepts, it's to understand the strengths and limitations of our language, to approach these big questions with humility and critical thinking, and maybe, just maybe, get a glimpse of something beyond our everyday experience. And if all else fails, you can always fall back on the timeless wisdom of theologians throughout the ages. Shrug, it's a mystery. Alright folks, it's time to put on our philosophical detective hats and dive into a real-world example of religious language. Our suspect? The seemingly innocent phrase, God is love. It sounds simple enough, right? Well, buckle up, because we're about to unpack this linguistic suitcase. And let me tell you, it's got more layers than a philosophical onion. First, let's look at this statement literally. God is love. Okay, are we saying that the divine being is literally the emotion of love? Is God just a giant floating heart emoji in the sky? Probably not what most believers mean. This is where we start to see the limitations of literal interpretations in religious language. So if not literal, is it metaphor? Are we saying God is like love? But then, what kind of love are we talking about? The warm, fuzzy feeling you get from a hug? The passionate romance of a telenovela? The unconditional love of a parent for a child? Or maybe the love you feel for pizza at 2 a.m.? No judgment here. The meaning changes dramatically depending on how we understand the word love. Now let's throw some cultural variations into the mix. In English, we're stuck with one word for love, but in ancient Greek, they had different words. Eros for romantic love, philia for friendship, agape for unconditional divine love. So when we say God is love in English, are we losing something in translation? And here's where it gets really fun. The philosophical implications. If God is love, does that mean that love is God? Are we saying that anytime anyone experiences love, they're experiencing God? Is the love between two atheists secretly a divine encounter? It's enough to make my brain do somersaults. This simple phrase also challenges our understanding of God. If God is love, does that mean that God can't be anything that is not loving? What about divine judgment or wrath? Concepts that appear in many religious traditions. Are those metaphors too, or are we cherry-picking our divine attributes? You see what I mean about unpacking? This three-word phrase opens up a whole can of philosophical worms. It's like one of those tricky birthday candles. When you just think you've got it figured out, it lights up with new questions. So the next time someone just casually drops God is love into conversation, you can smile knowingly, knowing the philosophical rabbit hole that little phrase represents. Just maybe don't launch into this whole explanation at a dinner party, unless you want to see how quickly you can clear a room. So now let's zoom out for a second and think about what all of this means when we're talking about religion in the real world. So picture this. You've got a Buddhist, a Christian, and a Muslim walking into a room. No, this isn't the start of a joke. They all want to talk about beliefs, but they're using different words, different concepts. How do they find common ground? This is where understanding religious language becomes crucial. It's like they're all trying to describe the same mountain, but from different sides. By recognizing that we might be using different words for similar concepts, we open the door to real understanding. It's not about agreeing on everything, but about truly hearing each other. So now let's tackle the elephant in the room, science and religion. Are they really at odds, or are they just speaking different dialects? Science deals with the observable, the measurable. Religion often deals with the intangible, the transcendent, so to speak. It's like one speaking prose and the other one speaking poetry. Both are valid forms of expression, but they're suited for very different purposes. Understanding this can help us navigate those tricky conversations where science and faith seem to clash. Finally, let's get personal. Have you ever had a profound spiritual experience? Something that shook you to your core. Now try putting that into words. Not so easy, is it? This gap between what we experience and what we can express is at the heart of religious language. It's why some turn to poetry, music, or art to convey their faith. It reminds us to be patient with ourselves and others when words fall short. In the end, the way we talk about religion shapes how humans think about it, how humans practice it, and how humans share it with others. It's a reminder that in matters of this faith, sometimes the most profound truths lie in the spaces between our words. Alright folks, we've reached the end of our linguistic labyrinth. Let's take a moment to catch our breath and reflect on the journey through this wonderful, wacky world of religious language. We've seen that talking about the divine is about as easy as nailing Jell-O to a wall. We've grappled with the limits of human language, danced with metaphors, and even flirted with the idea that maybe we should just zip it all together when it comes to the God talk. But here's the kicker. Despite all these challenges, humans keep on keeping on with religious language. We're like the little engine that could of philosophy. I think I can describe the indescribable. I think I can. I think I can. And you know what? That persistence is pretty remarkable. It speaks to our deep-seated need to understand, to connect, to reach for something beyond our everyday experience. Whether you're a believer, an atheist, or consider yourself somewhere in between, there's something profoundly human about this struggle to articulate the ineffable. So what's the takeaway from all of this? Well, for starters, maybe we could all benefit from a hefty dose of humility when it comes to religious language. The next time you're tempted to say you know exactly what God is or isn't, remember our friend the apophatic theologian, and maybe throw in a cosmic shrug. Secondly, let's celebrate the creativity and diversity of religious expression. From metaphors to mysteries, from poetry to paradoxes, humans have come up with countless ways to talk about this divine. It's like a linguistic tapestry, each thread adding to the bigger picture. Lastly, I encourage you to reflect on your own use of religious language. What do your words really mean? How do they shape your understanding? And how do they impact your interactions with others who might use different words or concepts? That's it for this one. So what do you think? Do you think that religious people are all speaking the same language and us atheists just don't understand? Or do you think that muddled religious language gets in the way of humans just trying to do their best? Let me know in the comments below. Also, let me know your thoughts on this style of video. It's similar to my other lectures, but I really want to make this more relaxed and casual. I love language and using very specific words to express a very specific message. This time, I wanted to point out that I have seen the disconnect between theists and atheists when using the same words, but we mean different things. We talk past each other and it can get super frustrating. I wanted to make this to highlight that everyone needs to be more patient and maybe even take the time to investigate what your conversation partner, no matter what side they're on, actually means when they use certain words. We need to pay better attention to what and how we use the words we do. Without effective communication, all we're doing is driving people away from our position. Remember, at the end of the day, religious language is a tool. Like any tool, it can be used well or poorly to build bridges or walls. The choice, my friend, is up to you. So go forth and ponder the imponderable, speak the unspeakable, and maybe, just maybe, find new ways to express the inexpressible. And if all else fails, you can always fall back on the universal language of interpretive dance. I hear it works wonders for explaining transubstantiation. So thank you for joining me on this philosophical adventure. If nothing else, I hope your words will be ever meaningful, and your metaphors ever apt, and your cosmic questions ever intriguing. But speaking of effective and position, I need to thank my patrons: Calamitous Anima, Sora, Long-Haired Lefty, Musical Ocelot, Ooga Booga Luga, Anonymous Netizen, Angel, Tarek Alkasab, Jamminbomb, Kine Henningsen, and Triple Towel, who are the spaghetti-filled landscape that lifts up my riding unicorn. Though, if you would like to express words of encouragement in the dream equivalent of Klingon said by my former math teacher, you can join them for as low as $1 a month at patreon.com/darkofalltrades. I know this one was a bit different, and I'm glad you all stuck with me to the end, as I tried something a bit newer. Thank you. I look forward to your feedback. And as always, keep learning.